Level up your LA Kings experience with the new Vivid Seats Elite Seats. All the on-ice Kings action with even more exclusive access. Enjoy great seats to the game along with premier dining inside the Lexus Club with all-you-can-eat food and non-alcoholic beverages. Plus, get a free Team LA Kings item and parking with your purchase. Score your Vivid Seats Elite Seats tickets today and earn rewards on each purchase from the only ticket company that rewards you for buying. Experience it live with Vivid Seats, the official partner of the LA Kings.
You're listening to an LA Kings podcast. For more episodes of this and every other Kings program, visit lakings.com/podcast.
You're listening to All the Kings Men, the official podcast of the LA Kings. Now, here's your host, Jesse Cohen.
Joining me now to recap the first 7 games of the season, Zach Dooley. How are you doing today, Zach?
I'm tired, Jesse.
I'm sure.
I'm tired today.
I'm sure. Listen, I was tired last night. We're recording this Wednesday, October 23rd, and the Kings game ended at, 10:50, 10:55 last night?
AM today or PM last night?
Yeah, it did feel. Now, I only had to do an episode of Kings Talk afterwards. You had to get on a flight and come home. So I imagine I was exhausted. I imagine you're exhausted as well.
I'm pretty tired. I'm pretty tired. I guess, collateral damage of the late puck drop is that time gets added on to the end of when you return home. So usually Vegas is a nice in and out. You're home before midnight. This time we didn't even take off till after midnight. So you're getting in at like 1:30, then you get home and it's 2, and it adds up when that's day 22 of what's been 7 straight on the road to start the year. So I'm tired.
It's really more than 7 because you guys went to Quebec too.
It's really 9, right? It's 9.
Yeah.
And we did get a couple back, in between Anaheim and the East Coast trip. But I'll tell you what, I am very excited for a game at home. I guess what will be today when this episode goes out.
Yeah.
I'm excited to have that routine back for sure, and excited not to be on the road right now.
And let's be clear, the only reason that we're doing an episode devoted to the first road trip is because it was such an unusual road trip. And, there was a lot of talk about the road trip ending against Montreal because you guys did get to come home.
Yeah.
The team practiced at Toyota Sports Performance Center. Everybody got to have a free meal, or a home meal, not a free meal. People got their hair cut, et cetera, et cetera. But I know enough just from my own life of traveling that if you even if you get that one day, if you're going to go right back out on the road the following day, even if it's just for a quick one trip to Vegas, you got to pack, you got to, if you have loved ones or pets or children or whatever, you got to make sure that everything's taken care of. Like, it's not really coming home if you're there for 24 hours.
I did view it as like a 5-game trip and a 2-game trip, but you don't really fully adjust, right? Because like the first day you get back after 18 days on the road, we got in, 3 a.m. That next day is a wash. Like you're not going to feel good that day. And you're not going to feel good the day after that either. So it's like those were the 2 days that we had to like get back into it. And those are the 2 days where you feel your worst coming off that trip. So it takes time, 18 days on Eastern time, 18 days of flights, of travel, of hotels. It certainly adds up. Good to see the light at the end of the tunnel here. And travel for the most part is pretty light over the next couple of weeks. So hopefully for me, for the team staff, and most importantly for the Kings on the ice, they reset to being at home and translate that into some points.
So let's talk about the play on the ice, because in the offseason, you and I said, really the only thing that we know for sure is that Mikey Anderson and Drew Doughty will be a dynamite pair. That is obviously out the window with Drew Doughty getting injured. And so everything that happened on this trip comes with this giant caveat, this massive asterisk of, well, it's this crazy road trip to start the season. They found out very late, that Drew Doughty would not be available to them, or early in training camp, I suppose, but late in the summer. So, what is this team, right? What is it, and it was a confusing road trip, I think, for a lot of people. The Buffalo game was a win that maybe you wouldn't say was earned, or you'd say there was an element of fortune in getting those 2 points. The Boston game was hard fought, but ultimately the better team won in overtime, but you got a point. The Ottawa game, I don't even know. Like I was talking to my dad this morning, and we were talking about the 7 games, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm not even thinking about the Ottawa game. That's just not even in my evaluation. If Todd McClellan were still the coach, I think he'd have called it a stinker, or maybe not. I don't know, because they scored 7. I mean, it was just a weird game,
wacky game.
Yeah, total. Like I don't know what to make of it. The loss to Toronto, the win against Montreal and Anaheim, and then the loss to Vegas. It's a lot of like one step forward, one step back. The end result is that they are 3-2-2, which is a game above 500. And we're going into the home opener without Drew Doughty and possibly without the starting goalie. I just have no idea. After 7 games, I think I might have less of an idea what this team is than I did at game 1.
You want to know what this road trip did? It feeds whatever your narrative was. If your narrative was something to start the year, this road trip plays into that, right? If you're super positive, if you're super negative, if you're somewhere in the middle, if you're unknown, maybe like you and I were, it feeds that narrative for sure. And you can spin what happened to fit that narrative. If you think this team sucks, you're going to say, well, they beat 2 bad teams and got smoked by Vegas and Toronto. If you think that things are going to be good, you say, hey, 8 points from 7 straight on the road. That's a pretty good trip without your number 1 defenseman and half without your starting goaltender. And if you're somewhere in the middle, you're probably like us, where there are still a lot of questions to be answered. And there are questions we won't know the answer to for 20 games, another month, like a while, right? Like, I think your assessment of each of those games is probably pretty spot on, right? Like you look at the wins, Montreal and Anaheim, I thought were probably the 2 best games. I thought Boston was pretty solid too. Buffalo was the Darcy Kemper show and the Anze Kopitar show, where like those 2 guys won that game. Ottawa was a circus. I don't know how to describe that. It was so weird. It was Seattle, right? It was Minnesota, those 7-6, 9-8 games, just a one-off game that you don't learn much from and you hopefully figure out. And then Toronto and Vegas, couple specific areas, I think really let the Kings down in those games and overshadowed some of the good things they did. So all in all, 3-2-2, maybe not a glowing reflection on franchise history, but only twice on like 15 career 7-game trips have the Kings had more points than 8 from a 7-game road trip. So when you stack it up against the, 71-72 Kings, I guess it looked pretty good. But I think this was probably the fewest number of points that they could come back with that you'd say, yeah, that's a pretty good trip, right? Like if it was 7, I don't think we'd be saying that. And I think 8 was like the base of like, yeah, we'll take that.
I mean, I don't want to be overly Pollyanna-ish, but
can you define that for me?
Just like rose-colored glasses, full-blown optimism. Nothing's ever going to go wrong anywhere.
That's my word of the day. Pollyannish.
Pollyanna is the word, and I'm modifying it to be Pollyanna-ish.
You're not superstitious, but you are a little stitious.
A little stitious, yeah. If the Boston, and I understand if my aunt had wheels, should be a bicycle, but if the Boston game and the Ottawa game turn into wins in overtime, we are talking about a 5-2 record.
Yeah, 10 points, right?
Despite obvious concerns in play style, right? Like the concerns that you may have about a team, like for example, Nashville, whatever's going on with Nashville, it's an 82-game season. They have plenty of time to work through it. Edmonton did it last year. Maybe they'll do it again this year. What you really can't afford is what's happening to San Jose. You can't go over in the first 7 games, because now just to break even, you've got to win however many in a row.
And it's 7 in the hole.
Yeah. And it's like Calgary. What are they? 5-0-1 or something like that. That's a nice cushion, right? 5 games is a nice cushion. So it's not a 3-2-2 is not a dynamite record, but I have to imagine that Fiala, Deneau, and Moore will look more like they did last year than they have at times this year. I have to imagine that Byfield will look better than he has early in this season. I have to imagine that Darcy Kemper will return, that Drew Doughty will return. And so 82-game seasons become an equation of, can you keep your head above water long enough for your strengths to emerge? And, we saw with Edmonton last year, again, this is my extraordinarily positive read on the situation. 3-2-2 after 7 games is not panic time yet.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Especially without Doughty, right? Like,
yeah,
I don't know if he's the best player on the team, but he's certainly the most valuable when you look at the defensemen who have left the organization over the last few years. Like, the value on Doughty is at an all-time high, and he's the guy who's down. You can't do what San Jose did or is doing. You can't kick yourself out of the playoff race. You have to keep yourself right in the mix. And I'm kind of looking at the 21-22 blueprint. Like, that team was just hovering around like 525, 530, 550 winning percentage until they realized that Danault and Arvidsson were really good together. And then they just took off. Like, they exploded from there. So they can do that. When Drew comes back, it should help and put everything into place. But the big picture of it all is fine, right? 8 points from 7 games. That's not the problem. You could point to concerning elements of the team's play. The big one for me is probably consistency, right? Because the concerns last night in Vegas were not even remotely concerns in Montreal or Anaheim. And I was kind of hoping like these 3-4 things were about to become a trend, and then they weren't.
And just because I spent some time, being positive, let's now go ahead and clearly outline the things that are a concern. One of the goals of this season was to boost the offense without sacrificing the defensive identity. The Kings are currently minus in goals for and against as a team. Special teams are struggling, and the goals against per game is 24th worst in the league at 3.57, and the offense is just 16th at 3.14. So we hope that all those things happen, but that's the problem with hope, right? Is that your hope, like, nobody saw the Arvidsson, Danault, and Moore line coming, or the Kaliev, Lizotte, and Lemieux trio. So sort of crossing your fingers and saying like, well, there will be another January miracle.
Just like no one probably had Fogle, Turcotte, and LaFerriere being,
for sure. For sure,
most impactful line, right?
And I know I know that I personally have faith that Byfield, Kopitar, and Kempe, and Fiala, Danault, and Moore, if given time, will look more like they have over the last year or so. But you can't, the question, and this is a question for the coaching staff, how much time do you give your lines to deliver what you need them to deliver before you change them, right? In this case, we saw the Byfield, Fiala, and Fogle line last 4 games, and before they made the decision to switch it up. So we saw Jim Hiller try some line combos at the end of the game against Vegas last night. I imagine, and I don't know if anybody had a chance to ask him, you'd know better than I would. I imagine that was just an in-game adjustment, that isn't something that they'll be looking to do moving forward.
I did not ask him after that one.
I was probably a bit tense.
I tend to agree with you on that. To be honest, I looked at those as changes that did not impact the outcome of the game. So I tried to ask questions that were about why they were in a 5-1 hole, not what happened when they were in a 5-1 hole.
Fair.
So I could see that maybe tomorrow, or I guess this morning, will be a good indication of, are any of those changes sticking? I thought of it as like a late game shuffle to see if anything stuck. But yeah, I've been finding myself saying this phrase that I came up with, sort of. It's like the NHL waits for no one. So like they always say the NHL is not a development league. And typically that is applied to like 20-year-old players who you don't develop at that age in the NHL.
Mm-hmm.
I think it kind of applies right now to like the team as a whole, right? Like everything is different in a lot of different ways. So as you quote unquote develop as a group, are we going to see a couple games that might look lopsided as they work through some things? And the question is, if that happens, can you accrue enough points in the other games where you seem to figure it out to keep yourself in a good spot? So when it clicks, hopefully you can have that same ascension that the Kings did a couple years ago. And we don't know if they will or not, right? Like We can think that it'll come. We think that as systems and mentalities and line combinations and the penalty kill and the power, as these things become more second nature, you'd like to think that the play and the results would only get better. But we don't know if that's the case or not until we see it unfold.
You know, it's funny. I'm looking at the 21-22 team stats right now, 2021-2022 team stats. The Kings had substandard special teams that season, 16.1 power play percent and 76.7 penalty kill. But made the playoffs, and you know, I don't want to say comfortably, but my recollection is of that being a good season. And it's rare, I think, to have obvious flaws in both special teams and still consider it a good season. And I don't think it's any coincidence. I'd have to go back and actually look, but I'm sure it's no coincidence that Drew Doughty missed 41 games that year. And that's honestly my real takeaway from these first 7 games. Maybe I drank the Kool-Aid a little bit too hard, but I was definitely in the camp of like, well, we did it 2 years ago and, you know, we can do it again. Like Drew Doughty's incredible and he deserves a statue and a banner and all that. But, you know, he's only one man, for God's sake. And you watch these games and you're like, wow, Drew Doughty's really important, as it turns out.
I did not drink the Kool-Aid on that one, but I did drink the Kool-Aid a little bit on the, you know, preseason is regular season situation, you know, where certain things that looked bad in the preseason looked good in the regular season, and certain things that looked good in the preseason did not look good in the regular season. And you realize like 10 minutes into the Buffalo game, you're like, that didn't mean a thing. Like, it's like shame on me.
Yeah.
For doing that. Yeah, I don't know, right? Like I don't know. I think we both would agree that there's no panic after 7 games that you've got 8 points from. But we both would probably agree that there are certain things that need to be improved and addressed.
Well, so I am fond of saying that like the NHL can be broken down into chapters, and every chapter is defined by the one that comes after it, whether you want that to be games or seasons or, you know, eras, whatever. Mm-hmm. The San Jose game will, I think, have a lot to say about the Vegas game, which had a lot to say about the Anaheim game, which had a lot to say about the Montreal, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So we got a text last night during Kings Talk of somebody saying like, you know, hey, it's San Jose home opener. It's a bum team, right? That should be great. And I was like, yeah, unless you want to be superstitious and say, oh shoot, a team coming in with no wins on the season, right? Like what a perfect spoiler opportunity for that team. It's
it's the NHL, right? Like
yeah,
the Sharks won in this building last year.
For sure. But it's also one of those tough spots where even if they win, even if the Kings win tomorrow night or tonight, if you're listening to this on Thursday, like you said, it'll fit whatever narrative you want it to fit. If you want to dismiss it as, you know, beating the worst team in the league that doesn't have a win on the season yet and being ultimately meaningless, that's going to fit your narrative. If you want it to be a sign of, hey, look, we beat Buffalo, we beat Anaheim, we beat Montreal, you know, 4 wins, 4-2-2, right, is a great start to a season, and it is, then that'll suit your narrative. If I'm just hoping for not a repeat of the Ottawa game, I guess.
Yeah, right.
but that's the sort of wild thing. And honestly, and part of this, I think part of the confusion for me is I have been so accustomed after the start of 5 seasons to Todd McClellan's demeanor and talking points and way of describing things, that now that it's a different voice, I feel less comfortable because the routine, what I'm used to, isn't there. Right at this point in the season, I feel like Todd McClellan would be talking about team identity and needing to get back to it, and, you know, while also sort of self-contradicting by saying last year doesn't matter, but we need to, you know, I just sort of knew what Todd would say.
Yeah.
And now Jim Hiller is obviously a very different person. And he's more affable, but he's also more blunt in a way, you know, like he'll simply say, no, I'm not going to tell you that. or he'll tease Dennis Bernstein about asking the same type of question over and over again.
And if he's not concerned, he will just let you know that he is not concerned,
and not engage on any level with the question.
Yeah, and like he was adamant that the 6-1 loss in Vegas, the game play was not 6-1 in his opinion,
right?
And he wasn't gonna get up there and throw a fuss because they lost by 5 when he didn't feel they played 5 goals worse than the Golden Knights. And I think sometimes that might not resonate well with fans always. But when it goes well and he's up there, you see the personality, which is so good. Like the Montreal game, it's like everyone, it's infectious. It's just different, right? Because Todd was a little more stoic and a little bit more direct. No, that's the wrong word, because a little bit more long-winded in certain things. Whereas Jimmy is more direct for sure.
There's also, and I'm not sure that there's anything to be done about it, but the Toronto game and the Vegas game, because it was a lead early for the opponent, there's a way of looking at it where you go like, all right, Toronto was up 2-0 pretty early in that game.
Yeah.
That was kind of it. Like, even if you want to say the Kings played well, trying to evaluate it is tough because Toronto, I don't know if you saw the clip of their coach on the bench screaming at his team up 5-2 or whatever the score was. And he's screaming at them, wake up, get into it, like whatever. And you're like, oh, okay.
Because that game was so weird because 15 minutes sunk 60.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
and
the other
and
45
Vegas too,
I thought,
right? It was 3-0 before I knew what was going on.
I thought 3 moments in the Vegas game sunk the entire game. It was the first power play, it was the 2 penalty kills, and it was the 6 straight minutes of PP time with no goal.
Yes, and the goal that went in off of Brant Clark's foot. Like, what are you going to do? It's just bad luck.
And even on the power play goal, it was a double deflection from Stone and Eichel. Like, 2 good, those goals are going to happen. Like the first power play goal, I went down and watched it a lot, and there were breakdowns. The second one, it's a double deflection. I don't know.
Yeah.
And the other, it's an own goal off of it just kicked in off the guy's shin pad. And then all of a sudden you're down 3-0.
I can't remember exactly the numbers. I'm going to try and find them real quick. I want to say the Kings had 77 shot attempts to Vegas's 50 something. And so if you're trying to evaluate how the game went, 79-53. The Kings had 79 shot attempts. Vegas had 53. The Kings controlled in all these things. So I don't disagree with Jim Hiller. It's just, it's hard when, like I said, the Toronto game and the Vegas game, which were the 2 undisputed blowout losses.
Yeah.
Those games were over before, like I said, before I had a chance to collect my thoughts. And I understand that they're not really over because you have a chance to fight back. But when you see the way that the team with the lead reacts to it, when you mix that in with Buffalo and with Ottawa, it's just really hard. Like, we're going to keep coming back to this point. It's just really hard to grasp onto anything definitive. And if you have an opinion going into it, whether that's that everything will be fine or that, inclined to believe that things will go well, or the opposite, these games are just going to confirm your belief.
That's the ultimate takeaway from this trip, right? I don't think you could put it much better. Like, if you felt one way coming in, you still feel that way. If you felt the other way, you probably still feel that way. And the game against San Jose is not going to sway anybody. The away game in San Jose next week, I don't think is going to sway anybody. Even the home game against Utah, I don't think is going to sway anybody individually. If the Kings go out and win or lose all 3 of those games, I think it might start to sway some people a little bit. But the team is probably what you thought it was going in. And if they can keep putting points in the bank, it will allow them the chance to become a team that sways opinions or confirms opinions. And if they don't, it would do it the other way. And we just don't know.
I do want to talk about Warren Foegele, because as I was watching the game last night, about 3 minutes maybe before he scored, obviously there's been a lot of talk about the play of Alex Turcotte and Alex Laferriere, and that line has been singled out for praise by Jim Hiller. But I remembered a moment, and I hope I'm not saying anything I shouldn't, but there was a moment in camp where we were talking about Samuel Fagemo, and the phrase was said by somebody who will remain nameless unless they wish to identify themselves. At some point, we have to either stop talking about Fagemo's shot or he's got to start burying some of them. And I started to think of myself, Warren Fogel's either got to start scoring, or we've got to stop talking about how good this line is playing. And then, like, he scored almost as soon as I thought to myself.
Undoubtedly his best game, right?
Yeah.
But I had the question written down even before he scored. Like, he was really good. Mm-hmm. And he gets by far the least love on that line because he's a veteran, not a drafted prospect. But he fits the mold of that line. Like, those three guys think the same way, I think. Like, kind of the way that, like, Phil, Trevor, and Arby did. Like, it's not the same style line, so I don't want to compare it, and it's been 3 games. I just think that they kind of have that like-minded approach with Turcotte, LaFerriere, and Fogel. I thought he was really strong last night, so it was good to see him kind of get rewarded for playing a good game, and hopefully that keeps going. I thought he's been really strong since he moved to that line, and after not really noticing him a ton in those first few games.
It's a shame that it came in a game that the team lost 6-1, because it can be easy.
It's funny because, like, at the time it was like, oh, late goal, second period.
Right.
Can you take that into the third and, like, build on it, because the power play didn't get the job done, but then it almost didn't matter because, oh, maybe that was the goal that they needed that just kind of jump started them. And it went from, like, oh yeah, like, that's a storyline to, like, oh, it's 6-1. It kind of didn't matter for the team, and hopefully it matters for the player.
Yeah, and it was, I don't want to say it was luck, because obviously he needed to have the presence of mind to find the puck coming off the dasher boards and put it behind the goalie, but it certainly couldn't have been a play that they drew up, or I guess it could have been, but there was
like 3 other chances he had during the game that he created by no luck whatsoever that didn't go. So it was maybe a make your own luck situation by going to the right spot.
And I'm just hoping that it's one of those goals that now the pressure's, now he's got one, right? Like, so maybe now
the ketchup bottle.
Yeah. Right. It comes easy or a lucky bounce, whatever. And then you're like, okay, phew, now I can score. Edmondson was gone for a few games and returned. Darcy Kemper was there for a few games, was put on IR. Like, I don't even know what the lineup will be on Thursday. Sorry, I'm just very confused about this team right now. I don't know if that's coming through.
I mean, I don't either, right? Because it was a lopsided loss. The lines were changed during the game, and it's kind of tough when, like, the lines that started the game, like, I think we both agree that, like, it feels like they should work if given time, because the third lines looked really good and the other 2 lines are known quantities. It just didn't quite click in Vegas. So I could see a full scale change. I could see them running it back, or maybe they stick with what they did at the end of the game. I don't know. We'll find out in morning skate. It'll be a full team skate with the off day on Wednesday. So we'll see. I don't know either.
And it's been a few years since the Kings have had a full complement of healthy scratches to choose from, right? Last year it was sort of, is this extra guy going to play or not? And for the second half of the season, we knew pretty definitively that most times he wasn't. But now, Akil Thomas has yet to check into a game. And I thought that Kyle Burrows and Caleb Jones at various points in the 7 games both looked fine. I thought some of them had moments where they struggled, but, like, any of those 3 players could be in the lineup and it wouldn't throw me for a loop. I don't think it would.
Caleb Jones. Yeah.
I mean, solid. I thought he and Clark made a great pair, frankly. So it's just it's going to be a weird year, I suspect.
Yeah, I think it might be. Which, I don't know. Sometimes when you get weird, it gets fun. Sometimes it doesn't. So I guess this podcast might be titled, like, we don't know.
Yeah.
Because, like, there are a lot of things that, like, if your hunch is it's going to go one way, then nothing would have deterred you from it. And, I still feel like certain things will happen, and you hope that other things will happen. And if they all do, you're sitting pretty. And if they don't, it's just going to be day to day until they either do or don't happen. And that's the NHL.
And it's not even on the ice either. Heading into crypto.com arena for the Thursday night game against the Sharks, I know some Kings employees have already been in the building. We do tech rehearsals every year. So, the game operations team obviously knows what the changes look like and what it's going to be like. But I don't. I have no idea.
Yeah.
And, we're on ESPN this year, not iHeart. So there are changes there. It's like since June, probably earlier, since the start of the offseason, really, it's been a learning process across the board, off the ice and on the ice.
Yeah.
And it just continues on Thursday against the San Jose Sharks. It's going to be fascinating.
Mm-hmm. I agree. We were actually just talking about that at the game in Vegas. It was like, you seen the building yet? You seen the building yet? And everyone's like, no.
Yeah.
Like, no one's been there. Like, I've seen the scoreboard or renderings or pictures of it at least. Like,
I've seen the building on Twitter, but I haven't been there.
Like, I know the Sparks have used the scoreboard, so like that's in and functioning, but like they took a freaking wall out. Like,
no, they punched a hole in the building.
Like.
Yeah,
it's just glass, or I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know what it's going to look like for a 7 p.m. game on Thursday. I don't know what it's going to look like for a 1 p.m. game on Saturday. I don't know what it's going to look like for a Lakers game when the ice doesn't melt. Like, I don't know. I'm actually really excited for it because sometimes you get into your home routine and it becomes monotonous for us.
Yeah,
because every game kind of feels like the same. This is going to be super exciting. Like getting down there for this first game with some new looking stuff. Like that's going to be pretty exciting, I think, for both of us.
Yeah, I've got a full page of notes about just listing all the changes so we can expect to the building. If I wanted to include the roster and the team and everything, it'd probably expand into 2 or 3 pages worth of notes. So, I mean, I guess all I can say to everybody is if you are going to the game tonight, if you're listening to this Thursday morning, maybe try and get there a little earlier than usual. If for no other reason than to just check out some of the changes, because I mean, the obvious big one is the upstairs section, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, I forget what we're calling it.
It's the new look, like City View Terrace, right?
Yeah, City View Terrace. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Standing room only. There's a bar. Like, I have no idea what it's going to look like.
The renderings of the whole thing, I still remember 3 years ago seeing them. I was like, that's freaking cool. Like, that was the most exciting thing for me. So to actually have it happen is very exciting. So I'm really looking forward to that personally. I think the on paper of it all was really, really cool.
Yeah, and there's a Doritos After Dark bar now. So if you like
Doritos After Dark,
if you like menus based exclusively around Doritos products, that's there for you as well.
That's the menu for you.
Yeah, well, I'm not actually a big Doritos fan, Cool Ranch or otherwise. I never.
Well, not you, man. If you're a Doritos person, that is the place for you.
Believe it or not, I never got into Doritos. Anyway,
not a Doritos guy. Huh?
No, I was more of a Fritos guy. But anyway, I think that's gonna wrap it up here. Zach, welcome home. Glad to have you back after what felt like a month on the road. And we will have more episodes and more updates coming soon. So stay tuned, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.